Welcome to Mattys Mental Health Podcast, aiming to spread awareness on mental health by sharing the real-life stories.
Christine Macfadyen is here today. How you doing, Christine?
Good, thank you. How are you?
Doing very well, doing very good. Thank you for being here today.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure, my pleasure.
Why don't you just give us a little introduction, who you are, what you do, that sort of thing?
Sure. Well, as you said, my name is Christine Macfadyen. My career, I have a career in early childhood education. However, I have been unable to work for the last 4 years due to I have a chronic illness, an autoimmune disease, which limits my ability to work. So right now, I have been a support in the mental health community by sharing my story. I spend time with family and friends. I've been trying to do some volunteer work that I'd like to do. And I have an interview on Thursday for a respite care worker. So
Okay, very cool.
we'll see how that, yeah.
So we can get into that, Christine. I know we chatted a little bit before, and you kind of sent me the outline of your story, as far as mental health and stuff. And so, where did that all start for you?
It started when I was 10. I guess maybe a little bit before that, when I was 5, I grew up in a house until I was 5 with my father yelling and screaming and being abusive. So I do remember some events where I would go running into my closet, and that was a coping mechanism for being afraid and like hiding it from that abuse and that anger. But to really pinpoint where it started was when my grandfather died, my poppy, my maternal grandfather died, and he was a huge part of my life, and he was the male role model that we were missing because after when I was 5, my mom left that marriage and started raising us on her own, and she did that until we were adults, and it's just been the Macfadyen trio for the last 30 years. But it came out in the way of, I wrote a poem after my poppy died, and I said that I didn't want to be here. I wanted to be wherever he was. So that was my first real thought of dying, like wanting to kill myself. But I didn't follow through with the thoughts. I wrote a poem, and I was seeing a guidance counselor at school, so I was able to get through that way. However, at home, it came out in bursts of anger where I would be destructive of some of my mom's breakable items. I remember kicking a hole in my bedroom wall once, but then I would run and hide and lock myself in the bathroom. And that was fear, I guess, that I would be in trouble or my mom would be mad at me, but it was never that. She was just concerned as to why I was acting that way. And really, it wasn't anger towards her, but it was anger towards my father, and because he was an absent father. So that's where it started. And I continued to get help for my anger and got that under control. And then I guess around the age of 14, it really became apparent that I had some mental health issues, and my mom saw them. And like I had an eating disorder. I was anorexic when I was 15. So when I was 15, I started to see a psychiatrist at the Richmond Center here in Charlottetown, and I saw a therapist, and that continued until I was 22 years old. The therapist. I saw the psychiatrist for the first 5 years, I think, of that.
I don't mean to cut you off. Could I just slow you down for 1 sec, ask a few questions? Is that okay?
Sure, yeah.
Just as far as like you mentioned, like anger as a child and getting help for that, like what did you find that like the help you received helped you with anger?
No, it helped me realize that I had a problem, and that it helped me recognize when I was being angry, and to stop and pause and really figure out what I was angry about.
Right.
But it wasn't until I was a bit older that I could, control it in the way that I can control my anger now, as an adult. As a child, it was much harder. They recommended punching pillows and stuff like that, and that never helped me. It didn't help me. And now, like as an adult, I don't know if you're familiar with the anger iceberg.
No.
And it's like the mental health iceberg, I guess, but it's an anger
What's
iceberg.
going on underneath?
It's
Anger's
like
just at the top.
Yeah, anger is the first emotion that usually appears for everyone, but there's like 50, 60, 100 other things under there, like
That makes a lot of
fear,
sense.
anxiety, shame, guilt, all of those things are under there. And sadness, any emotion that you're feeling, but anger, it for the most part comes out first.
Right.
So once I was aware of that, then I could really I can control, okay, I need to walk away from this situation, and I will come back and address it when I feel like I'm ready.
Right. Just like you mentioned the iceberg, like, and first of all, like just tracking back to what you said about your younger childhood, that must have been really hard.
Yeah, it was. Like I carried that trauma until I was 34.
Yeah.
I'm 36 now, and I really ended it myself, but I took a lot of help from professionals to get me to the point that I was able to go and close that, like 20-year long, like 29-year long, 30-year long chapter.
Yeah. Wow.
So, I had help so when I was 15, I went to the Richmond Center, had a psychiatrist, I had a therapist, but at the age of 22, I had a pretty good handle on my anxiety because it wasn't as bad. It was really just like social anxiety and situational anxiety and some depression, and really a lot of body image issues and abandonment issues. That's what we worked on. Self-esteem, that kind of thing. And then we decided that, it was time that therapy ended. And then in 2009, I nearly lost my life to the disease, the chronic illness that I have, which is called granulomatosis with polyangiitis. used to be called Wagner's granulomatosis with polyangiitis.
It's big words.
Um,
A couple of big words.
yeah, so that was really my
Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I didn't know any of these big words until 2009, but I've been researching a lot since then. But that's where my breaking point was 2009. Like, I got rushed to Halifax because I was in renal failure and I had a pulmonary hemorrhage, and I ended up in the ICU and nearly dying that night on a ventilator.
Wow.
And then I spent the month in the hospital on dialysis and getting my plasma replaced. So I was 24 years old and this was all happening to me.
Wow.
And it was just my mother and I over at the hospital. And of course I had visitors later on, but it was a really scary few days. And I had been sick for about 3 weeks prior to going to the hospital. And that's my first real, like, those other attacks that I would have, I wouldn't consider them so much a panic attack, but they might have been like little anxiety attacks, but my first panic attack I remember was driving to a doctor's appointment after I got home from the hospital in September of 2009. My mom, I panicked. She had to stop on the side of the road, and I barfed on the side of the road in front of the APM Center in Cornwall. And my mom had never witnessed me in that panic before either. So it scared her. It scared me. I didn't get to my appointment because I was not able to go. And that's when it really got bad. Like, I was on prednisone, which is a steroid, and it caused me to gain 40 pounds in a month and a half. And with my body image issues that were in the past, that then dug everything back up. And I was, doing the same things that I was doing when I was anorexic, except there was nothing I could do to control it because this drug was saving my life, literally. But it was such a love-hate relationship with it. And I stopped taking my medication. And that would be the first time that I attempted suicide.
Wow.
And it would have been about 6 months after I got home from the hospital. I just couldn't take my life literally turned upside down. Like, I had just graduated from the early childhood care and education program at Holland College.
Yeah.
I was 24 years old. I had a full-time job waiting for me. I was scheduled to work an 8-week contract as a special needs assistant at Chances. And I worked 4 of those 8 weeks, and I was sick for 2 of them. And it was a horrible time. And something like that is such a life-altering experience for anyone to go through. But when you're 24 years old and you have your whole life ahead of you, it really, really affects you.
Imagine, like, it's like life is just finally starting. You're finally starting to kind of start life, and you, as you mentioned, you've had all this trauma and all these things you work through, and it feels like you kind of, like, things are on the upswing, I imagine. And then it's like, it's just, as soon as you thought everything was going up, it just goes right down to the bottom again.
Yeah. And that has been my life for the last 12 years. So my mental health has been really has declined within the last 12 years, but also I've been on the path to recovery for the last year and a half.
Okay. Wow.
Mental health, my mental health recovery journey started when I met the right therapist for me. It just fits, and I've been doing really good work for the last year and a half, and I'm very grateful that I have her.
That's awesome. That's really good to hear.
Yeah, I had to fight a lot. I had to fight for her because, as we know, the system here in Prince Edward Island is a little broken
Yeah.
and needs some work. And they took away my mental health care when I was physically unable to get out of bed to go to my therapist. And I asked if I could have a phone appointment, and they said no. And then COVID hit a month later, and everything was on the phone. So I got on the phone to uh, the director of community mental health for Queens County, and I just said, I need a therapist. Like, mental health and physical health are both connected.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can't have one without the other,
No.
and they're both equally important. So I need a therapist right now. So they got me Heidi, my therapist, and we've been working on radical acceptance of my chronic illness.
Yeah.
And she helped me close, well, this psychologist that I saw for about 2 years at the Richmond Center prepared me to close the chapter of my childhood and all that trauma.
Yeah.
And then Heidi helped me, and I closed that chapter by going and sitting with my father and asking him questions and getting the answers that I wanted. And I've been able to close the chapter. Does it come up in my brain sometimes, and do I think about it? Sure. But I know now that my worth is not based upon whether or not my father can love me, because he's incapable of loving me and of being a father. And, you know, I really started, it really clicked when I just thought about him as a person and not my father, just
Yeah.
another human being.
Yeah.
And he has his own mental health issues, and obviously that's why he acted the way he did. And so then when I was able to disconnect the kind of thought, like, no, he's not my father, he's just this man who has psychological issues himself, and he's incapable of being a father to me. And I was able to then say, I am lovable, I am worthy,
Wow.
I have been this all these years. And that's really when, you know, I started my healing, was when I closed that chapter. I was able to heal.
That makes a lot of sense. Like, it's like you can almost look at it with more empathy than when you look at it like that. Like, I think we put our parents on a pedestal, as we should, because they raise us, and they're, you know
Mm-hmm.
we love them. But it's
And
like, if you can look at it from, like, they are just people, and
right, they make
this
mistakes.
this
They
person, yeah, and they, like you said, um, he was incapable. He had mental health issues as well. It's like he's a person that just
and
didn't have it.
knowing child development and knowing my father's childhood, I was able to also see, because while I've been off work for the last 4 years, 5 years, I've been reading my early childhood books over again, just to keep my mind
Busy.
occupied and busy. And it clicked one day, and I said to my psychologist, I said, he was bullied when he was a child. So he may feel like he never had one person to stand up for him. And if you don't have one person to stand up for you and who loves you and shows you that love, then, if you don't have anybody, it's not good. But if you have one person that does, then you're going to be okay. But he didn't really have the greatest of, I mean, my grandparents, don't get me wrong, they loved all their children, but there's obviously some resentment on his part from his childhood
Right.
that has caused him to act the way that he's been acting for the last 36 years since I was born. It really happened, a couple years into their marriage.
I think that it's really interesting and probably pretty brave on your part to. You mentioned you went and talked to him and asked him questions.
Yeah, that was it. I shouldn't have gone by myself, but I went because he has an anger issue, and he lives in the woods in Bonsha, so he probably has a shotgun or two, and he the police recommended that I never go back there alone. Because I did end up calling the police because he ended up assaulting me. He hit me and tried to push me off his bench at the end of the meeting, but I got all the answers that I wanted, and my aunt and uncle lived like 2.5 seconds away, and by the time I got to my aunt and uncle's house, I was in full-blown panic attack. I don't even know how I was driving, and I had a full-blown panic attack. My whole family had to come, but I closed the chapter, and I was able to then go to a family gathering with him there, and I just made fun of him the whole time because it just gave me pleasure to do that. And like they said something about, oh, let's take individual family photos. And I was like, what? You're going to take Sumner's photo by himself and mine and my sister's alone too? Like, what are you going to do? There's no family here. Like, we're not a family. Yeah. Anyway, it was a scary 45 minutes on his bench. And when he told me to get off his property, I sat there longer than I probably should have and then I was like, oh, geez, I should leave now. So I got in my car and drove down to my aunt and uncle's, but it had to happen. It probably shouldn't have happened the way that it did, but that's hindsight.
I find that fascinating because I think a lot of people are in that similar position, right? They have trauma with a parent, a family member, and like when you say that had to happen, like what does that mean to you?
For me, it had to happen for me to close that chapter and for me to heal. And I didn't want to have any regrets when I died or he died. So when I die or he dies, I don't want to have any regrets. So right now, if they called me tomorrow and told me that my father passed away, I'm not exactly sure what I would feel. I don't know that yet, but I know guilt or regret would not be one of the things. And recently I heard of someone who lost their father who had a similar relationship as I did. And they never got the chance to sit on a bench and talk to them because they weren't ready to do that. And my father would never have done it had I not walked up to his door and banged on the door and said, can we talk? And I had left him a nasty voicemail the night before. So I actually came to apologize for leaving the voicemail. That's what I went to do first. And I said, I want to apologize for leaving you that nasty voicemail. And I want to sit and talk as people on let's sit out on this bench and talk. So he agreed, but not everyone is bold like I am, or
I like that.
Is ready to do that, right? They're not ready to do that, and that's okay. Yeah. It's okay to not be ready, but for me, it had to happen for me to heal, and I wanted to heal that because it was causing me the most pain, and like it caused me a lot of most of my mental health issues.
Yeah.
Like we're contributing. The contributing factor was my childhood and my father, my relationship with my father, and that kind of thing, or the lack thereof a relationship. And so once I did that, I started healing, and
Could I just ask you though, and I mean to cut you off again, it's just like because I think this is like really interesting and um like even you said, you know, sometimes like people aren't ready to have that conversation. And it you know, it sounds like it took you like a lot of years to come to the place where you realized maybe you even had that conversation or you were ready to. But like what sort of questions did you ask and did you feel a sense of clarity afterwards? If you don't mind
Yeah,
sharing.
I asked specific questions like, why do you treat my sister differently than me? And he gave me an answer that was, in my opinion, it was very, it was a stupid answer. He said, I like your sister better because she's quiet and unemotional, which is not true. My sister has emotions. And yes, she's quiet. She's quiet, but I was always the child that was like that, you know, I got in the truck if we did see him. We saw him for the first 12 years, like until I was 12, I should say. And I would get in the truck, and if he would start talking about my family, my mom and the people that I saw all the time, like my immediate family, in a poor way, I would stand up to him and say, if you're going to do that, we're not coming with you. So
Yeah.
he didn't like that about me. And he never really wanted me from the beginning because I was a premature baby and I was sick and I caused a lot of like stress and that sort of thing. And then I asked questions why he did the things that he did, like why he put a timer on the hot water heater, uh, why he just why he did the things that he did. Um, I'm kind of drawing a blank as to what else I asked him.
That's okay.
But the last thing that he said was, I didn't get married to get divorced. And I said, my mother did not get married to get abused. And that's how it ended. He said, get off my property and don't ever come back. And I will never go back there unless I inherit the land whenever he dies.
Did
Because I love the property. It's beautiful. And I did live there for 5 years and I visited there until I was 12. But it was on his terms. Like he would I would call him and say, Daddy, can we come visit you? And he would say, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. And then like maybe 2 weeks later, he'd call the day before and say, can I take the girls on Sunday? And then Mom would say yes, because she allowed him to have visitation. She had full custody. But when it got to the point of us leaving, like we would be looking at the clock. I remember me specifically looking at the clock and being like, oh, he's going to be here in like 2 minutes. And as soon as I'd see his truck pull up the driveway, I'd start getting anxiety. And then I'd start saying to my mom, I don't want to go. And I'd be crying. And it just was not a good situation. And then in 2009, whenever I was sick, my mom, like the doctors told my mom to call the family because that I might not make it through the night that I had my pulmonary hemorrhage. So she called my father and told him this. And she asked him if he had anything that he might want to say to me. And he said, I'm not a doctor. What would I have anything to say to her? And Mom said, not as a doctor, but as a father. And he said, no, I have nothing to say to her, and hung up. So that gave, when I got home from the hospital, I was very angry. And I think I was also really sad that, you know, even on my deathbed, my father wouldn't come or wouldn't send a card or wouldn't phone. So I really, that's when I cut him out of my life 100%, like as a father. Like I I didn't look at him as a father. He was a sperm donor.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
Right.
because what kind of father? You can't be a father if you're not a father if you do that, or I don't know how you do that. And that's one question I asked him too, and I don't really remember his answer because it was just a bullshit answer.
Yeah.
He doesn't have good answers for anything, because what would be a good answer to that question?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, for sure.
But I feel light. I feel lighter.
Yeah.
I don't feel scared that I might see him out in public. Like one time I was at the superstore and I saw he was like 3 people ahead of me in the lineup, and I left my whole cart of groceries there and left the superstore. But I'm not scared of him anymore. I'm not like anxious about seeing him. He's just a person. He's just the beat man. He grew the biggest beats on PEI. He was on national news.
Wow.
Yeah.
Neat, man.
He does some things good. He can grow a nice garden, and he's a good carpenter. So
Right.
not all bad.
Right. So coming out of that conversation that day, did you feel clarity? Or did you feel like you
Yeah, like it took me a few days to process, but I did have a lot of clarity. And now I can just joke. I just joke about it now. And it's not really something that I talk about a whole lot anymore, just because I don't think about him a whole lot. And it used to be on my mind a lot. He would be. Or the lack there, like the abandonment part, where I felt abandoned by him, was on my mind a lot. And I don't feel that anxiety as much anymore around abandonment.
How has that shift changed your life?
Well, for my dating life, it changed drastically because I would never let anyone in.
Right.
I had a big wall up. It was like a spiky wall. It threw daggers at people. But
Armored guards and bone
yeah,
arrows.
there was, armor guards. And you needed to really break down my walls to get in. And I only let really 4 people into my space. Like I've only had 4 relationships, and they weren't all long term. I've really only had 2 long term relationships, or 3, I guess. But with my partner and I, my abandonment issues have caused some issues between the 2 of us, but we have been able to work those out through me healing that part of that wound.
Are you able to communicate?
For the rest of my life, it's changed too. Like for any relationship, I don't feel quite as anxious that people are going to leave me. Like I always felt like people were going to leave me and I would be alone, and that people were mad at me, or and those things have kind of trickled off. They're not as prominent anymore.
Right. You mentioned like in your relationship in particular, like are you able to communicate more effectively now, like how you're feeling, and just like understanding yourself a little bit better, where you don't feel the abandonment as much as you used to? Are you able to communicate that with your partner now more than the past?
I am, yeah. And we have a better communication style, or we have better communication. We were having some communication breakdown. It has resolved itself, and it's all just, it kind of comes along with the healing. And he's on his own healing journey. He has mental health issues as well, and we're both on our healing journey, but we're trying our best to, help each other along the way. And we've had our bumps, but right now we're really good. And we're both pretty mentally healthy right now. We've been having a good summer so far, and yeah.
It's good. So good. I guess my last question, seemed to just be like, you mentioned a few times your body image,
Mm.
and when you were younger and kind of like through your life, I guess, like, what were the first signs of that, and how have you been able to work through that?
It's something I still struggle with today. Actually, right now I'm in kind of a relapse, I guess you would say,
Okay.
where my mind is back in the anorexic mindset. It never really went away. It's really your self-talk. Like, I say horrible things about myself in my head or out loud whenever I look at myself in the mirror. And the first signs of it were, for me, I have scars on my body, all over my body, but I had a lot of scars even at a young age because I had my gallbladder out when I was 5 and I was premature. So I had scars everywhere. And I remember specifically, I was going into grade 10 and I had gone on a trip to Texas. And I came back from Texas, and when I got to high school, I was being bullied. My whole group of friends dropped me. I had no friends. I was being bullied. And it just kind of started there. And then it slowly worked its way to, I was measuring myself every day with a measuring tape. I weighed myself every day. I drank an enormous amount of water a day. I limited my eating to like something like a bird would eat, something little, like little nibbles. And then I'd always be sick. And yeah, it started there. And I've had some hospitalization stays where we discuss it, but it probably needs to be readdressed now, just so that I don't revert back to the same things. But I don't want to go to the hospital, so I'll talk to my therapist about it. I don't really like the hospital that much. My last day was in January, and I'm good not to go back there anytime soon until the system changes. I had a really horrible experience in January.
Right. Okay. I'll just give you a few more questions here. So first one would be, what is the biggest thing you feel that the hospital needs to change, mental health care system?
The first thing they need to do is take mental health seriously.
Okay.
They need to radically change the system. And
Like that.
I
What might
went
that
and
look
had
like?
a meeting. Well, I had a meeting with the minister, well, the previous minister of health, James Alward, and he told me that there was going to be mobile crisis units. And that was 3 years ago. I had that meeting, and now they're just coming out with these crisis units. They need to be more efficient and put money into mental health and take it seriously and really move it along more quickly, like in all aspects of health on PEI, but specifically mental health. There are people that, like our addiction center has been put on hold. The new one that they were building has been put on hold because of COVID, I guess. But COVID's pretty much over now, so I'm not sure what they're doing with that. They were going to be doing these mobile crisis units. They're not open yet, but they are coming. They shut down the psychiatric urgent care clinic, which I accessed quite a few times. And it was all I needed. I didn't need to go stay in the hospital. I just needed to talk to a psychiatrist. And it was wonderful. It was a great resource for people. And they've taken away anything that has been good. And now it's left with these broken pieces that need to go back together, but there's missing pieces of the puzzle. And that's, money, that's energy and time spent looking at what really needs to change. Like in January, I was in a crisis. I wanted to kill myself. I had a plan. I was going to execute it.
Right.
My mom called the police and they did a wellness check on me, and my mom took me to the hospital, and they admitted me. I waited in like the emergency I was there 4 days, and I had seen 3 psychiatrists in those 4 days at that point, and all 3 of them felt that I was in the right place. On the 4th day, I go on Zoom or telehealth to see a new psychiatrist, and I have a diagnosis. I have many diagnoses, but I have one that is borderline personality disorder. And I go into the meeting, and as soon as he came on the screen, I knew that I was going to be discharged because of who the psychiatrist was. And he argued with me when I told him that if you let me leave this place, I'm going to kill myself. And his answer was, I sure hope you don't. And he told me that because I have borderline personality disorder, the hospital is not the best place for me. And I argued with him and I said, but it is when I'm in crisis. And my mom was sitting beside me and said, I don't feel comfortable taking her home because in the past I have run away and I was missing for quite a number of hours, quite a number of hours. And finally they found me, but I've had a rough, since 2018, my chronic illness relapsed. So I'm not in remission anymore. Since then, my mental health really declined. And this is stuff that has happened like January and past. But after I got over that little January experience, like I really had to heal how I was treated, because he did discharge me that night and it was a snowstorm and the police were called to help escort me out of the hospital. And I was arguing, no, I don't want to go, because if I go out there, I'm going to kill myself. And they literally just kicked me out.
I'm at a loss for words.
I know. So I don't know if that story tells you where the healthcare system, the mental health care system is, but that's where it's at. And he simply made an observation, an opinion. He formed an opinion about me because because of my diagnosis, and didn't listen to me. Did not listen to the patient. When you're in crisis, you need to be safe. And my mom, who I was going home with, said, I can't keep her safe. And they still shoved me out the door. They ripped my jacket. They threw me on the concrete. It was awful. I did a CBC interview not too long ago. I guess it was in March about it. But it really they need to do better. PEI needs to do better. And I have lots of great ideas as to how they could do better. Like, I had to fight for my therapist because they took away my therapist. And now I had to fight so hard that my psychiatrist fought for me as well. And I have an online therapist who is not even on Prince Edward Island. They need to give more people access to that. Because the list is like Santa's list for people waiting to get in to see psychiatrists. And we don't have a psychologist right now that is in the community mental health. She left 2.5 years ago, and no one has replaced her yet. They need to do better. They need to take people seriously, and they need to listen to the patients. We know our bodies and our minds best. If it wasn't a snowstorm that night, I would not be here right now. And we almost got in a head-on collision on the way home anyhow. And we went up to Summerside Hospital, and the psychiatrist had called ahead and told them not to triage me. So when I got to Summerside, they sent me out the door. So in one day, I was kicked out of 2 hospitals.
Wow.
And I needed medical attention because I had a really bad cough, and it ended up being pneumonia, and they wouldn't check it. And then it ended up a few weeks later, it was pneumonia. And they even denied me regular medical attention, not just mental health. I didn't know that legally they could turn you away from the hospital, but they did.
Wow.
And I'm only telling this story because I wanted to maybe change the system or help change the system, or maybe be a ripple in the pond to make the system change. I know I'm only one person. I can't make the system change, but I can, as someone wise told me, I can create ripples. And hopefully those ripples will accumulate and multiply, and it will change the system eventually. But it's something that should be on the forefront of Health PEI's mind. And we have a new CEO of Health PEI, Dr. Michael Gardam. And I hope that he can shift some things around, and because the other CEO didn't really do a great job at her. She failed us. They are failing us as Islanders.
Right. Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's important to share these things. I think it's really important that you share this.
I tell my story a lot just so that I can either help a person feel less alone, or make ripples for change.
Well, I think what you shared, like, I think it will make ripples, and the more people that share it, it will make more ripples, and we can work towards change.
Yeah, for sure.
Because everything you told me, I'm just at a loss for words. That is your experience, and like I've heard similar stories to that too. It's just
Yeah,
it's mind-boggling that happens.
it is, and I've heard similar stories as well. But doctors are allowed. You cannot. I get a copy of my chart every time I go to the hospital, which is a lot, because you're allowed to do that as a patient. And the amount of lies that are in my notes on my chart, it's actually disgusting. And you can call to have your information changed, but they cannot change the opinion of a doctor. So when he made that opinion of me that I needed to go home, even though my mom said I wasn't safe and all that, he then wrote all these lies underneath, and I'm now getting it corrected. But something needs to change there as well. There needs to be a higher standard kept. And these people take ethical oaths and they just write lies. And nobody, I'm not sure if everyone gets their chart. I've talked to some people, they don't even know that was an option to get your chart. But I encourage everyone to get their chart after they've had a hospital stay and look at the nursing notes and the doctor's notes, because half the time the information in there is incorrect. That's been my experience.
Out of curiosity, what was written on that chart that time that you got kicked out?
They said that my mother was yelling, which is a complete lie. My mother was the only one that was trying to help me stay calm. Everyone else was not yelling, but they were rudely trying to get me out of the room because they needed my room. That's the story. End of story. They needed my room, so they needed to kick me out. And it was discriminatory because I have borderline personality disorder. He could make it work. He could say, it's been proven that when you have BPD, hospital is not the best place for you. Yes, but when you're in crisis, it is. And they said that a code white was called on me, and it wasn't. There was never a code white called on me. I can't quite remember the other nursing notes that were wrong, but the main one was that my mom was yelling, and he didn't write down that I said I'm going to kill myself. Like, that should be in there. Our conversation should be in there. That's what the psychiatric nurse is there for, to record the notes. And he should be recording some notes. Everything should be recorded and then just transcribed onto a patient's chart. Not, I'm just going to wing it and then lie whenever I write the chart notes. There needs to be a higher standard held for healthcare professionals, nurses, doctors. I have a lot of experience with doctors because I have a chronic illness, and it's funny because a lot of people don't think that the mental and the physical are connected, but it very much is. And I was going to a medical appointment once. I was out on a pass from being in psychiatric holding at the hospital, and I went to my ENT doctor, And he looked at me and saw how deeply sad and depressed and discouraged I was because of my physical health. And he knew I was in the hospital for my mental health. And he did the greatest thing that could have ever happened to me with my on my chronic illness side of things. He sent me to Toronto to a rare autoimmune disease center, and that helped my mental health immensely because I got a proper diagnosis, I got on proper treatment, I started feeling better physically. That helps your mental health. Like if, I don't know, people just, and even the healthcare professionals that are in the hospital, they don't, like one day I was in there for the pneumonia that I was talking about. And I mentioned to the nurse that I was having a lot of anxiety because of the January episode. And I asked if she could ask a doctor, which they can do, for an Ativan. And she said, no, I'm too busy. And you're not here for mental health reasons anyway. You're here for a cough and a sore chest. And I said, but I'm having an anxiety attack. They let me have, I had a panic attack. They let me have a 2-hour-long panic attack before I called a social worker that I know in the hospital, and she calmed me down. But I had to do that for myself. The nurses wouldn't do it. And then like 6 hours later, another nurse came on shift and she realized that I was anxious, came back with an Ativan for me and a Tylenol for my fever. So both things are connected. When you're sick, you're scared, you're worried, you might be anxious. That's totally your mental health and your physical health connected. Mm-hmm. And I think not just people, but people in general, but healthcare professionals need to see that they're connected.
Yeah.
Like the emergency room staff need to see that they're connected.
Yeah. It goes both ways. It's the whole panic attack. Like how many people come in thinking they're having a heart attack and they're actually having a panic attack. Their heart rate's crazy high. It's physiological, right?
It is. You feel it everywhere, yeah, when you have a panic attack.
Like even the effects like on your gastrointestinal system, like if you're anxious, like you throw up, you get sick. Mm-hmm. If you're depressed, like you're not going outside, like your immune system's going to be down, like you're not going to, like the whole thing is just, of course it's one of the same,
Yeah, and once they start putting more effort and love into our mental health care system and our healthcare system in general, I think that we could be better. I believe that the system can get better.
Yeah, I think so. Like, and I think, by the way, I think they did continue construction of the new addiction center.
Oh, did they? Okay.
Yeah, a friend of mine works there, like just by the French school there.
Yeah.
They're building that there again. I think the plan is, and I'm not 100% sure, I think they're building like a addiction center and like a walk-in thing.
Okay.
Mental health. But
I'm
not sure 100% sure of the plans, but I know that they're building again there, which is a good sign.
Well, that's good. That's good to hear.
Yeah. Thanks so much for sharing all this, Christine.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
I really appreciate it. Is there anything you'd like to add before we hop off?
Well, I would just like to say that, I will continue to be a mental health advocate for people who can't or don't have it in them to be able to do that. I will continue on this journey of advocating and hopefully making the system better. And my inbox is always open for messages on Facebook if, someone just needs to talk, or they need some advice or anything like that. I think having a community around you is a good thing.
I think so too.
And I think that Canadian Mental Health Association has done a good job of that. They have a peer support group, and I've attended that quite a number of times. And, they have the peer support workers, and the group is great. And so I think they're doing a wonderful job. It's not all bad. And, my story hasn't all been bad. I've had some good years in there too, but people should know that, healing is possible, and it's not linear. You're going to have bumps in the road, but it is possible to get out of that deep, dark hole, or the tunnel that has no light at the end. It's possible to get out. So I just want people that may feel hopeless or helpless, discouraged, just try to remember that take one day at a time, one step at a time. And tomorrow's a new day, and it's a new day to be a better version of yourself.
Very well put, Christine. Thanks so much for sharing.
Thank you, Matt.
Have a good day.
You too.
See you around. Thank you.
Bye-bye.